As you know, I'm Nanci Danison. Today we're going to be talking about the concepts of what the biblical God is like, at least as I remember from 12 years of Catholic education, and what source is like, as I know from personal experience. The material today is going to draw on three sources, no pun intended. One will be the personal experience that I had in the afterlife, and also the research that I've done on other expanded afterlife experiencers like myself. Two will be what I learned in the Roman Catholic Church growing up in the church from ages 0 to 43. And the third will be, while I was in the afterlife the first time, I was shown what I call a documentary film of the development of humans, and within that was the development of human religions. So combining the three of those, the first thing I think you need to understand is human nature, particularly when it comes to religions. Humans, once they became self-aware, realized that they were in an environment full of animals that could kill them, full of weather phenomena that were life-threatening. They had no control over their environment, no control over much of anything. They had to forage for food and live in already existing shelters. They were primitive and scared all the time. Humans have a survival instinct that has built into it fear, because humans are prey. They prey on each other. Other animals prey on humans. Sometimes the elements seem like they're preying on humans. So religions were born of fear and trying to control that fear in the only way that humans could figure out how to do it. Early on, the first gods that humankind had were natural phenomena. The sun, the moon, the stars, the wind, the seas, things that affected human life on a daily basis, over which they had no control. And they seemed supernatural. If you don't know anything about weather, a storm does seem like a supernatural event. So humans, in a way, deified these phenomena out of fear of them, and then also in an attempt to get some kind of control over them, some way to influence their good humors, their good graces, just like humans interacting with other humans. The only thing that primitive man had to base any kind of thinking on was the observation of the other people in their little group, the people that were in their family, or maybe they had a little village. So that's it. That's all they had to work with. So they used that knowledge to construct gods out of the sun and the moon and the stars and the winds and the seas and other things, assuming that those gods acted just like humans and could be influenced and controlled just like humans, because that's the only information they had. As time went on and mankind, or the human species, developed, there were more attempts to make deities out of animals. Certain kinds of animals were considered to be sacred. There are still animals that are considered to be sacred today. And later still, humans started combining man and animal into gods. So you end up with, Pan, one of either Greek or Roman gods, I don't remember which, it's half animal and half man, and other gods like that are half and half. There was a time in early human development when people assumed that the gods walked the earth. They were giants. they could have sex with female humans and produce god offspring that were half human, half god. So all of these belief systems obviously reflected what humans could observe about life, among their own species. Later, when humans started turning their attention more to the heavens and studying it, there were in ancient Egypt and ancient Mesopotamia astronomers who developed the religion of astrology based upon what they learned from studying the stars and their positions. At that time in human development, humans assumed that the stars and the planets that they could see were gods. It was a natural offshoot of thinking that animals or other humans were gods. Here are these big shiny objects up in the sky that over long periods of time change position. Well, with the moon, changed position every night, basically, or changed its appearance every night. So they seemed like they were alive and they were deified as gods. And this religion of astrology took the step further, saying that human personality was dependent upon what vapors, what gods were in ascendance or in visual observation at the time that were giving off vapors that the baby inhaled with its first breath, and that's what determined its personality. And that's over a period of years of development, that's how we got the astrological signs, and why people who believe in that think that personalities are in alignment with the stars. So these were all early attempts by humankind to understand what was controlling their environment, what was controlling their actions, what was controlling the weather, what was controlling everything, because they knew it sure wasn't them, or at least that's what they thought. So it all makes sense when you look at it from a primitive standpoint. Then, as more time went on, more and more gods were created by different small groups of people. When I was in Catholic school in first grade, I learned that all the other religions were pagans. They had pagan gods, and that's such a pejorative term, but that's what we called them. And there were lots of them, right before the turn from BC to AD. And all of those pagan gods had human characteristics. Some of them had animal characteristics, some of them had supernatural characteristics, and there were lots of them because they all had a different field of expertise. Like one was the god of war, one was the god of knowledge, one was the god of beauty. They all had a different field of control and influence. Then, although I saw all the religions of the world and how they developed, I was trying to memorize as much as I could before I got back into the body. And so I didn't memorize much about the other religions. I remember more about Christianity because that was what I was used to on Earth. So this presentation is going to be basically about Christianity with a Roman Catholic flavor to it, because that's what I knew before I died. And I haven't really cared how that changed over time, because I know it's not the truth as I experienced it. So at the time that the change between BC before Christ and AD after the death of Christ, allegedly, Judaism was moving away from multiple gods, a pantheon of gods, to one God that they were calling Yahweh, or at least that's the name that I have seen the most in writing. It was a very slow process, and it didn't take place overnight, and it didn't you can't say that on such and such a date, the Jewish people were fully monotheistic. And you can't put a date on any of these things because, nobody could read and write, up until, I don't know when people started being able to read and write. I know that some of the Greeks and Romans could, but it was like maybe 1 to 3% of the population was literate. So there wasn't any way for knowledge to be spread other than by word of mouth. And who was in a position to spread knowledge by word of mouth? Travelers, people who were merchants. They were traveling from city to city and country to country, buying and selling goods. So it was merchants who developed the early, Christian religion. The earliest concept of Yahweh or a monotheistic God was still based on the knowledge of humans, because again there was no other knowledge available. There was no science. There wasn't anything known about geography. People generally didn't know anyone outside their own family or their own village. They didn't hear stories about other ideas. They were afraid of anything that was slightly different from themselves. So it was a very isolated, insulated, primitive way of creating a deity. And that's what humans have done over ages, is they created deities that kind of fit their social and their intellectual abilities at the time. And then what happened was, back in the, like the before 100 AD, Christianity kind of crystallized. Well, it was actually 100 to 300 AD when the Christian church was created, and it was clamped down on ancient beliefs and ancient ways of thinking and set them in stone and never changed. And so even as mankind has developed sociologically, intellectually, economically, scientifically, in every way possible over thousands of years, religions are stuck in the early days of Anno Domini, out of fear. A good part of it was fear. A better part of it was economic. Was the church was a force, a power, a political power, an economic power, and humans don't like to give up power for any